Welcome back to Cosmic Comics. I know I sometimes complain about overhyped covers, but this one lives up to the hype and then some. Captain Mar-vel Volume 1, Issue number 34, written by Jim Starlin and Steve Englehart, with art by Jim Starlin. This also marks sort of the end of Jim Starlin's run with Captain Mar-vel. The cover introduces us to Nitro, a man who explodes into atoms, then lives again, the man responsible for killing Captain Mar-vel. We begin at Avengers Mansion, where Rick has been patiently waiting by the Avengers telecommunicator to hear something from Mentor. Rick notes that Mentor is coming across a little haughty. Rick makes it sound as though he's been waiting weeks, but in truth, it's only been 1 day since the events of the Thanos War wrapped up. Following Thanos' attack on Titan, the Eternals have already begun rebuilding. Mentor says that those who fought to free them are taking a relaxation while showing Eros in what appears to be a harem. Considering that Eros, Moondragon, and Mentor were the only ones working to save them, this comes across as super creepy. Remember, during the Thanos War, when Mar-vel asked how big Titan's army was, Mentor told him, including Mar-vel, it now numbered 3. Mentor is putting an orgy on for his son, while forcing the rest of the Eternals, who were kept as slaves during the Thanos War, to begin reconstructing Titan. Well, if Eros gets to have a good time, I'm certain Moondragon gets to have an equal reward, right? At the very least, she's allowed to do what she wants, and has chosen to return to the Shaolin Monastery for a period of contemplation. For some reason, the name of the monastery has been changed, as originally it was the Shao Lam. Mentor is currently unaware of the location of Drax the Destroyer, which is odd because Mentor seemed to be in direct contact with him via Isaac throughout the Thanos War. We're told that Drax is having a hard time finding meaning now that Thanos is gone, and as for Kronos, he was freed from where Thanos had him bound. Mentor wraps up the recap by asking how Rick is doing. Rick says he's fair to middlin', and that's that. Rick seems super ready to get off the call. Once the call ends, Mar-vel wants to know why Rick lied to Mentor. Mar-vel can feel that Rick is sad. Basically, Rick is tired of having his life take a back seat to Mar-vel. He watches Mar-vel take on the big dogs while he hangs out in the negative zone. Mar-vel attempts to reassure Rick that by allowing him passage into the positive universe, that they are capable of providing some aid to the world. Mar-vel passes along one piece of advice. Rick should keep his 6 p.m. appointment with Mordecai P. Boggs. Rick seems to have forgotten about the meeting and goes rushing out the door towards Greenwich Village. That same night, 800 miles away, the Lunatic Legion is attempting to get in touch with Nitro, but he tells them to stuff it. We then learn that the voices represent an alien race because they refer to Nitro as Earthman. They go on to call him the most difficult of their converts. They warn him that returning to his birth planet doesn't remove him from their authority before ordering him to be in the vicinity of Gary, Indiana, tomorrow. We then switch back over to Rick, who is singing a song about Gary, Indiana, from the musical The Music Man. A woman walks out on stage expecting to meet a rock star and is surprised to find Rick playing show tunes. Rick asks her to introduce herself, and we meet Rachel Dandridge, or Dandy for short. Mordecai steps in, informing Rick that Dandy will be his stage partner. Rick looks surprised, as Mordecai never mentioned a partner. Mordecai insists that Rick trust his manager to help navigate Rick into stardom. The duo, Rick and Dandy, are set to perform in Denver in 2 weeks, the start of a 14-city tour. Dandy seems ready to go, but Rick is put out by Mordecai's ambush tactics. But he's told, hey, that's showbiz. And once more, Rick Jones is leaving the Avengers. This is one of the rare times Rick has a hard time saying goodbye. Him and Luann come face to face. In this narration, boy, much is said in this dim-lit room, and much more is left unsaid, but nothing need be said, for they both know that this is goodbye. Their night and their love end together. Wow. After following the subplot of Rick and his love of Luann through the entirety of the Thanos War, the reader deserves more than this. There was too much talk of love and Rick needing to fight for his girl and Luann's wistful pining to give the reader such a weak ending to their relationship. They don't just break up here. Their love ends. It's almost as though once she wasn't needed as a plot device, Rick and the writers had no use for her. Luann, the disposable girl. As he drives away, Rick continues to double down on the fact that he and Luann, they never had anything, but he finds himself wanting to stay. But yeah, he leaves. 800 miles away, and 10 hours later, at a secret Air Force base, a sergeant and captain are carefully moving some dangerous materials held within a canister. As the material is safely unloaded, we learn it's called Compound 13. Possibly unstable and definitely dangerous. The captain gives a salute to Carol, who corrects him. It's Miss Danvers, once again in the role of head of security. This is her first appearance in the pages of Mar-vel in 3 years. We learn that her career has been on the spot since the whole Walter Lawson / Captain Mar-vel dual identity thing took place under her watch. Because of that, she's got to run an extra tight watch. A shadowy figure overhears Carol. The figure steps forth, destroying the fence and warning Carol that she's got another problem on her hands. The man leaps between the guards, introducing himself as Nitro, and letting them know that he's here for Compound 13. One of the soldiers calls him out for not having a weapon, but Nitro shows them that he doesn't need a weapon. He then blows himself up. Carol Danvers is stunned by the attack, and she falls to the ground, and as she passes out, she sees a man reforming. Moments later, an armored truck crashes out of the gates of the base, being driven by Nitro, but unharmed. Rick, Dandy, and Mordecai are out on the road, lost on the way to their next gig. Of importance in this panel is a message left to us either by writer Jim Starlin or inker Jack Abel, or letter Tom Orzechowski left us a message backwards on the street sign, and that message reads, "This issue is the end." The meaning of this could be any number of things, but it leads me to believe that Compound 13 was always meant to lead to the death of Captain Mar-vel. Dandy is giving Rick a hard time, and Rick has finally had enough and wants to know what's up. She points out that maybe Rick wasn't the only one who didn't want a stage partner. She says she wanted to be Tina Turner without the Ike, but Mordecai, he tricked them both. Mordecai again insists that he only has his client's best interest at heart. That moment, Nitro comes rolling by in the armored truck. He scrapes against the side of their stopped car. This causes his truck to lose a tire. Nitro then leaps out of the vehicle, enraged that he won't be capable of continuing on in the truck. Nitro, he wants some new wheels. Mar-vel wants Rick to swap places, but as we saw earlier, Rick is tired of taking the back seat when it comes to the action. Mordecai makes it clear that he doesn't want any trouble. For this, he's punched so hard it knocks him off of his feet and knocks him out. Rick gets out of the vehicle and readies some moves he learned under Captain America, while Mar-vel continues his attempts to get Rick to swap places, sensing something unearthly about the behemoth. Rick opens with an impressive kick to Nitro's head, but he's backhanded across the road, where he finally admits to needing some help. Fortunately, Dandy currently has Nitro distracted, allowing Rick and Mar-vel to swap places. Dandy is talking tough, but it's Mar-vel who comes in and binds Nitro in place with a metal pole. Mar-vel instructs Dandy to take care of Mordecai. Dandy rushes off while Nitro is ready to show Mar-vel that he can blow himself up. He does so with a great 2-page spread. Mar-vel is sent flying through the air. Thanks to his cosmic awareness, Mar-vel could sense what was coming and hurled his body at the crest of the shockwave, riding it out and surviving. Where Nitro stood is a puddle, but then tendrils begin to form, and they begin to twist into solid masses, and then into a man. Mar-vel is ready to strike again. Much like Rick, he gives Nitro a kick to the face. Mar-vel knows that this might be the most dangerous foe of his life. Mar-vel turns towards Dandy and Mordecai and desperately instructs them to flee. Mar-vel knows that Nitro cannot conceive of a scenario where he loses. Therefore, Mar-vel thinks the longer it takes him to beat Mar-vel, the angrier his foe will become. He then provokes the reaction he's looking for and gets Nitro to explode a second time. Rick is worried, but Mar-vel assures him that he can outmaneuver Nitro. Nitro overhears these words and lets Mar-vel know that he's wrong. He then blows himself up again. This time, the blast knocks Mar-vel off of his feet. But Nitro isn't here to pick fights. He's here to retrieve something. He fetches the canister of Compound 13, just as the Lunatic Legion requested, and then uses Mordecai's car to escape. And of course, Mar-vel might have been put down, but he isn't out of this fight just yet. As he stands up, we learn, well, that blast really did hurt him. Mar-vel aches. A fraction of a second's difference, and he would have died. Carol has finally come to and located the source of the explosions. It's here that she finds Captain Mar-vel. This is the first time she's seen Mar-vel since his appearance change, but she doesn't mention the blonde hair. She gets right to the point and thanks him for saving her from Jan Rog. Mar-vel interrupts, insisting that at least for the moment, he's not important. Carol refocuses on the task at hand. She lets Mar-vel know that recovering Compound 13 is the most important thing they can do, and Mar-vel wants to know if it's more dangerous than Nitro. Short answer, yes. Long answer, it's the finest nerve gas ever made, the ultimate achievement of biological research. Not the cure for polio or smallpox, but the strongest nerve gas ever made. If used, it results in instant death. The canister contains enough of the compound to kill everything in the state of Indiana, and if it were replicated and then released in mass, it could kill every living thing on the planet within 1 day. Just one quick question. Who is manufacturing this and why? Mar-vel, hearing this, is already on the move. Soon he finds the car he's looking for, and Nitro sees him flying up from behind the car in the rearview mirror. As Mar-vel closes in, he grabs the back bumper and forces the vehicle to come to a stop. In return, Nitro blows himself up. Seriously, this guy has one move, but that one move is awesome. Following the explosion, Mar-vel notices that the canister of Compound 13 has sprung a leak. Mar-vel knows that he has to plug the canister now, or lives will be lost. He lets loose a physical tirade upon Nitro. As Mar-vel lands blow after blow, he notes that Nitro is too strong, too determined. Soon Nitro is going to explode once more. Mar-vel goes for a change in tactics and brings out Rick Jones, who seems surprised by this choice, but it's what Rick has been asking for. Rick backs off, wanting Mar-vel to explain himself. Mar-vel tells Rick to move in closer. Nitro is too powerful to surrender, but his powers must have limitations. Mar-vel wants to try and take Nitro beyond those limitations. Mar-vel wants Rick to strike his wristbands together right as Nitro explodes. Oof. That's some tough timing right there. It's a good thing we saw in the Thanos War that Rick can share in a little bit of that cosmic awareness. That must be how he's capable of nailing that timing perfect. The ensuing blast is felt 10 miles away, tossing Carol Danvers off her feet once more. In the rain of dust and debris, a figure begins to form. As it does so, the canister continues to leak. Mar-vel steps forth from the haze and reaches for the tank. Mar-vel hates that things ended the way they did with Nitro, while Rick attempts to keep Mar-vel focused on the task at hand. He has to close off the gas. Mar-vel listens to Rick and reaches down to do so. Afterwards, Rick wants to know if Mar-vel is alright, but he doesn't get a response. Rick isn't certain if Mar-vel can withstand the gas. This starts as a simple question, but quickly turns to panic as Mar-vel collapses on the grass. Rick, in the negative zone, feels Mar-vel slowly cease to breathe. And although Mar-vel still has some life in him, this moment marks the beginning of the end for our hero. The arc continues in Captain Mar-vel, Volume 1, Issue number 35, written by Steve Englehart and Mike Friedrich, with art by Alfredo Alcala. We pick up right where we left off, with Mar-vel having fallen into the grass after closing off the canister of Compound 13. One minor continuity issue with this splash page. Last issue Mar-vel fell onto his stomach, not his back, stuck inside of the negative zone, seemingly with no way out until Mar-vel wakes up as Rick Jones. Rick, as usual, is complaining about the situation. Rick is worried that Mar-vel might not be capable of surviving the deadly nerve gas, and that Rick could be trapped in the negative zone forever. As if Rick wasn't having a bad enough day already, Annihillus shows up, goading Rick that there is no way he could hide from him within this dimension forever. Rick starts throwing insults at him, and Annihillus grabs Rick by the throat and begins choking him, wondering if Rick might attempt to use a blast from his mind like he did last time the two of them met. This is a reference to the events of the Kree-Skrull War. Follow the link above to see where I cover the story in full. Annihilus takes Rick down to the ground and prepares to go in for the kill, but unfortunately that's when Mar-vel's last 3 hours on Earth are up, and the two are forced to switch places. Rick Jones disappears right in front of Annihilus and is replaced by Captain Mar-vel. Annihilus is left wondering, how can this be? Back on Earth, Rick realizes that Mar-vel is still bound by the 3-hour time rule. Carol Danvers, Mordecai, and Dandy are all on their way over to check on him. Carol checks on the canister of Compound 13 and is happy to see that it has been resealed. She wants to know if any of the gas escaped, and Rick gives her a bit of a half-truth in saying, no, not really. He then asks to be left alone to get some thinking done, but Rick is back under contract, and Mordecai insists that Rick follow Carol Danvers to the Air Force Base to make a statement. Rick assumes Mar-vel is safe from any additional effects of the gas while he's in the negative zone because it holds things in stasis, but Rick is worried about Annihilus. The question is quickly answered. He's not going to refuse such an easy victim. He hauls Captain Mar-vel behind him, taking him back to help discover the secret to his dimensional transfer. And then we get it outright in the narration. The reason why Annihilus wants to infiltrate the Earth and all the worlds beyond within the positive zone. Annihilus has become bored with the bleakness of the negative zone. Man, all Annihilus needed was a good hobby. Maybe painting would add a little color in his life, and everything could have been different. Rick is concentrating on Captain Mar-vel. He's worried because Mar-vel hasn't been talking to him as usual. Oddly, Rick says that if he switched places again, Mar-vel would die. And then the connection between Rick Jones and Captain Mar-vel gives us a new power. Rick uses their connection to astral project himself to where he's looking over Mar-vel from inside of the negative zone. When he does this, Rick passes out in the back of the car, scaring Mordecai. He then tells the ladies that Rick has passed out, and out of fear that it might be related to the nerve gas, they make haste to the hospital. Back in the negative zone, Rick Jones is becoming worried. This is the first time he has reversed the mental connection to the negative zone. But we can tell from the next panel that Rick's connection is more than mental because he's capable of lifting Mar-vel's arm as though it's his own. Rick says he's being drawn towards Mar-vel and he feels like he's merging with his body, down to the point where he can feel his mind connecting to Mar-vel's motor nerves. Again, Rick stops to show concern about this new power and wonders how any of this is taking place. Rick Jones feels certain that somebody else is pulling the strings. And then we see a small voice calling out to Rick from the depths of his own mind. The Supreme Intelligence rears his big green head, showing us he still has a finger on Rick and Mar-vel. He tells Rick that while Mar-vel is unconscious, Rick is capable of entering Mar-vel's mind and taking control of his body. Rick wants to know why, but all the Supreme Intelligence is willing to share is that Captain Mar-vel is extremely important to his plans, and because of this, as long as it is within his power, he will not let Mar-vel die. Rick is impressed and is willing to go along with the plan. As Rick says, whatever the Supreme Intelligence has planned has got to be important. Rick takes over Mar-vel's body and, having forgotten about Annihillus, rises forth like Frankenstein's monster. Annihillus believes Mar-vel has been faking his coma and insists that now he will have to kill Mar-vel. Mordecai has made certain that the press caught wind of Rick Jones' predicament with the nerve gas. The news catches the attention of Henry Pym and his wife Jan, who were in Chicago for a conference. And wow, and this leads to one heck of a meeting here as Carol Danvers meets Ant Man and the Wasp for the first time. Carol is currently working as a security advisor for the Defense Department and has been put in charge of Rick Jones' case. She is happy to have two Avengers on board to help out, but they quickly correct her by letting her know that they are both currently retired and working as research scientists. Carol eases their fears by letting them know that Rick wasn't affected by the nerve gas. If so, he would have already been dead. All the same, the doctors have no explanation for his coma. Poor cocky Carol Danvers doesn't realize that Rick's floor has been infiltrated by the living laser. At some point, I will fill in the early appearances of the living laser, but I'm putting it off for now. This one right here, I think, is the real living laser, but the one that comes back later in the issue, I don't think is. The living laser's orders are simple. Kill Rick Jones. Sitting by Rick's side are Mordecai P. Boggs and Dandy. Neither of the two seems overly concerned for Rick's health, and Mordecai is more concerned with how it's going to play off in the press if anything else. But Mordecai gets the action he's looking for when the living laser bursts into the room. Mordecai tells him to leave, but it's met with a blast, and that's all it takes for Mordecai to insist that he and Dandy do as the laser asks. The laser turns to kill Rick Jones, but in that moment he feels the sting of a wasp at his neck. Ant Man has also arrived on the scene. Laser attempts to squash them, but they are too fast, and Hank ends up pulling the rug out from under him, sending him to the floor. Once there, Laser is swarmed with ants. Insects crawling all over him is enough to send Living Laser fleeing from the scene. And I think that is actually the last time we might see the real Living Laser in this issue. In the negative zone, Rick Jones is still battling it out. When we catch back up to him, he's landed a good blow on Annihillus. Due to Mar-vel's slow movements, both combatants keep taking blows. Annihillus can tell something is off. He notes that although Captain Mar-vel is strong, he lacks the skills shown in their previous fights. Armed with this knowledge, Annihillus takes charge of the brawl. Although it's all smiles here, I can't help but feel that there must be some spicy undertones taking place here. Miss Danvers wants to know why the Living Laser wants to take out Rick Jones, but Hank and Janet are just as clueless as she is. I'd say the salt comes out when Hank insists that he and Jan, they'll protect Rick. Ouch, considering that protecting Rick is Carol's job at the moment. It's a nice gesture, but it also sort of is an underhanded way of saying that they don't have complete confidence in Carol being able to do her job. Before we can get to the bottom of that, Living Laser appears once more, and this is when I don't think it's the real Living Laser anymore. He shows up threatening to kill all of those involved. Hank notices that Janet has already shrank to wasp size and that Laser doesn't seem to notice or has forgotten about her, so he plays along for a minute by asking Laser why he's interested in Rick Jones. Laser's response is pretty bare bones. He serves the Lunatic Legion. Rick stands in their way, so they must kill him. Mordecai comes in and attempts to put a price on Rick's head in a good way, and offers to buy the Laser out. When he asks how much Rick is worth to the Legion, he's met with a knuckle sandwich. The Laser proclaims that the heroes no longer have the element of surprise. Hank is starting to get worried that Janet hasn't done anything yet. And for some reason, the Living Laser, instead of shooting Rick from across the room, comes across the room up to stand beside the bed, where he's going to kill Rick, but instead he explodes in a crackle of electrical flame. Carol thinks that he's killed himself, and Wasp comes in to let Hank know that the short was caused by her, but she didn't expect it to harm him. Wasp, being comic smart, knows that lasers are powered by rubies, and yes, some lasers do use synthetic rubies, and knowing this, Wasp pulled a ruby off of the Living Laser's belt. Instead of depowering the suit, Wasp actually killed the Living Laser, but surprise, surprise, the man she killed wasn't made of flesh, only plastic and metal. He's then referred to as a cyborg, but that's not really what the word means. He's more of an android or robot. That's all semantics, though. Anyways, he's short-circuited now. It's also good to see that Mordecai has recovered. In the negative zone, Rick decides that he can't defeat Annihillus and that it's better to live and fight another day. He decides to flee. To leave, Rick attempts to fly, and although it's awkward and he's flopping about, he successfully moves away from Annihillus. Rick is pretty sure that he can outpace Annihillus flying, even on his own turf. Annihillus comes out talking trash and giving chase. And, wouldn't you know, Mar-vel's harmless, positive energy photons, which were introduced during the Thanos War, cause explosions when Annihillus runs into them. Something about the collision of the positive and negative energy unleashes a destructive force. Poor Annihilus, it looks like he's completely out of it. Even his wings are covered in holes. Rick wakes up and is surprised that he's in a hospital bed. As he wakes up, Janet exclaims that he's okay, while Mordecai remarks that they didn't have to worry about the nerve gas. Rick hears this and goes up to Carol Danvers right away, asking if there is an antidote. Some has been shipped to the hospital, but it's only effective if administered right away. Rick then runs out of the room while telling everybody that Captain Mar-vel needs that antidote. As soon as Rick is out of sight, he clanks his wrists together. He and Mar-vel swap places once more, only this time Mar-vel hits the ground with a lifeless clump, his body still attempting to fight off the nerve gas. The next panel shows Mar-vel receiving the antidote and starting to come around. The note in the corner from Roy confirms that Mar-vel's time in the negative zone lapsed his body into stasis. Otherwise, he would have already been dead. A good thing that was mentioned, as 1 hour on Earth is equal to approximately 2 weeks in the negative zone. As Captain Mar-vel comes to, it takes him a moment to wrap his head around what is taking place. As he looks around, he sees that he's surrounded by friendly faces of people that he knows. Mar-vel checks in with Rick, who tells Mar-vel that he's ready to leave. Without saying so much as hello, thank you, or goodbye, Mar-vel flies away, landing on a nearby roof where he clangs his wrists together and brings Rick Jones back once more. Rick then leaves to go and explain what happened to his friends. The story Rick tells them references Howard the Duck, and Hank, knowing Rick's alter ego, attempts to help Rick sell the story. Mordecai seems ready to accept whatever Rick tells him, and the issue ends with an oddly creepy panel of Mordecai commenting on how we all can't drive the straight and narrow. The next issue promises more of the Lunatic Legion. Unfortunately, that promise falls short due to deadlines. Now, I'll give them credit for this. They own up to it on the opening splash of the next issue, and then give us a reprint of Captain Marvel's first appearance in Mar-vel Presents Volume 1, Issue number 12. As for the few new pages we do get, Steve Englehart, Jim Starlin, Tom Orzechowski, Bill Mantlo, and Roy Thomas are given credit on the issue. The Watcher is used to introduce the reprint, and the captions introduce artist Al Milgrom, who is going to be taking on the artwork in Captain Mar-vel, but I don't believe he actually did any of the artwork for this issue. Everything that has happened to Captain Mar-vel since his first appearance is then all wrapped up in a single one-page montage. The issue has a bit of a strange ending. The Watcher, who is totally rocking that man-child toga look here, raises his fist and tells us that the Lunatic Legion has a base on the moon in the home of the Watcher. Now, he usually has been pretty adamant about kicking most people out of his house as fast as possible, so that's pretty interesting. He knows that Captain Mar-vel will come to the moon looking for them, and upon doing so will learn that it is the Watcher who wants Captain Mar-vel dead, and that the Watcher will be forced to murder Captain Mar-vel, and that raises so many questions. And I really want to keep this episode going, but this is a great place to end it, as I feel this really marks the end of Jim Starlin's run with Captain Mar-vel, as the torch gets passed to Steve Englehart and Al Milgrom, who will both co-write most of the next 10 issues together, with Al doing pencils. The two jump off to a strong start with the 2-issue story arc, The Trial of the Watcher. Looking back, Jim Starlin's run with Captain Mar-vel was impressive. He took a character that was floundering after multiple reboots and brought him to the forefront of Marvel Comics. This run also gave us some memorable characters such as Thanos, Drax the Destroyer, Moondragon, Isaac, the Eternals of Titan, and more. Starlin then wraps up his run with these 3 issues, 2 issues and a couple pages, where he sets the groundwork for the death of a superhero. Compound 13 will eventually result in Mar-vel developing cancer and dying in Marvel Graphic Novel, Volume 1, Issue number 1, The Death of Captain Mar-vel, written by Jim Starlin. Compound 13 kills anything it touches, and although it doesn't happen all at once, it happens. I'll be back to follow Steve Englehart and Al Milgrom's run with Captain Mar-vel. Thanks for watching. Feel free to hit any of the buttons below. I'm out.